Hi doll people, and welcome to the Comfi Cardi tutorial. In this tutorial, I will show you how to make this lovely thing. And this one. And this one. But yes, in this Comfi Cardi tutorial, I will show you how to make your very own Comfi Cardi. With this tutorial, you will be able to make 3 different sizes. I made sizes ranging from big enough for a Patty Play Pal, small enough for an MSD, USD if you want a huge comfortable kind of effect sort of sizing for BJDs. The one we'll be focusing on in this video we'll be making for the Pear Smart doll, which incidentally also fits American Girl. Let me show you. Also fits American Girl. I'm so happy with that. In this tutorial, I would say that it's probably more for the intermediate crocheter or a really adventurous beginner crocheter. In this tutorial, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the materials that I'm using, the hooks that I'm using, and the different kind of variations you'll be able to cobble together. Okay, let's have a quick conversation about yarn weight and yarn hooks and the different sizes you'll be able to create with this tutorial. So you see here I have prepared some squares in front of you. Each of these squares are the exact same pattern. They've been worked up with different sizes of yarn, so the weight of the yarn, and they've been worked up with different size hooks. I mention this because you'll be asked to change your hook and your yarn weight throughout this project. So here we have the largest square. This was worked up with a 4 medium weight yarn, and it was worked up with a 4.5 millimeter hook. This is the setup that you would need in order to make a larger Comfi Cardi for a Patty Play Pal doll or an Annette Hempstead doll. Pretty big dolls. When you're working this project, when you get to the cuff areas of the cardi, so like around the wrist of the cardigan, you'll be asked to step down on your yarn to a lace weight or a 1 weight yarn, and you'd be using a 2.75 millimeter hook in order to work the cuffs on that project. Moving on to this square was worked up with a 3 weight yarn, and I used a 2.75 millimeter hook. That will create a garment that's about the size for an American Girl doll or an 18-inch doll, a Pear Smart doll, and you can get that big, comfortable, slouchy kind of a fit if you were making this in this weight with this hook for the classic Smart doll or any SD that's about the same size. In this project, you would also step down on your yarn weight and hook. You would step down to a lace weight or a weight 1 yarn, and you would use, with that yarn, you'd be using a 1.65 millimeter hook to work the cuffs. Now the last square, this is worked up with a 1 or a lace weight yarn, and I used a 1.65 millimeter hook, and I did not change the weight of yarn when we get to the cuffs working with this yarn and hook. You'll also need some scissors and a darning needle to weave in your ends. Also perhaps a couple of stitch markers or a couple of safety pins to mark your stitches when we get ready to do the sleeves. Okay. Really quickly, before we get started, I wanted to show you guys this visual aid that I quickly drew up. So we're going to be referring back to this visual aid a few times in the video just to help everybody be able to follow the steps appropriately, because while this garment works up, it's going to look a bit funky. It's not going to look like a cardigan until the later stretches in the video. So initially when we're starting, here, let's get closer. Initially when we're starting, you'll be starting here. You're going to create a granny square. From that granny square, we'll go to the front panels. And then after the front panels and the granny square has been created, Then we'll do the sleeves on either side. After all those components are finished, and we have something that looks like this, then we'll work on the cuffs, and then we'll sew down the sides, and then work on the bottom, and then around the opening areas in the front here. So I know this looks a bit weird right now. It looks pretty foreign. But it'll come together, and we'll refer back to this so that I can help you guys understand where you are in the pattern. I'm going to be using Lion Brand's Mandala yarn. I believe this is a 3-weight yarn. Yeah, this is a 3-weight yarn. You can't really see that. But yeah, this is a 3-weight yarn, and it's acrylic, and I believe the name of it is Gnome. It looks really cute. It's a rainbow yarn. It's a self-striping yarn, so the color throughout the tutorial will change. But all of these colors are pretty vibrant, so I think you'll still be able to see the stitches. I'm not really worried about you guys being able to see the stitches. I'll just zoom in. This stuff is great. I'm not going to rave too long, but I love this stuff. I'm going to be using a 2.75 millimeter hook. I know that this yarn requires a different hook. I actually think that this yarn wants me to use, it wants me to use a 5 millimeter hook. You can't really see that. Yeah, it wants me to use a 5 millimeter hook, but I'm a rebel and I crochet for my dolls, so I'm not going to do that. 2.75. So we're going to start with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 3. From your chain 3, you're going to locate your first chain, and you're going to place your hook in it, and you're going to slip stitch to create a tiny, tiny little ring. From here, we'll chain 2. Now this chain 2 would be the first leg in your granny cluster stitch. So to complete our first granny cluster stitch, we're going to create 2 double crochets right there in that tiny little ring. And don't worry about space because this will expand from your tail. So you'll be able to fit all your clusters in a tiny space. After your 2 double crochets, you'll chain 2. And then you're going to repeat the process by making 3 double crochets and then chaining 2 again. I'm sorry. That's 1, 2, 3, and then chain 2. You see, it's kind of getting pulled out of whack. That's fine. We'll just tighten that back up by pulling your tail, and it'll all come back together. I'm going to go ahead and do that process 2 more times to complete a square. Okay, you should have 4 clusters. 1, 2, 3, and then this would be the 4th. You would connect that chain 2 to that first cluster. This first cluster where you find yourself would be that first chain 2 that we did at the beginning. You're going to locate the top of that chain 2 and you're going to slip stitch into it to complete your square. It looks kind of wonky right now, but I swear it's a square. We're going to slip stitch across these 2 double crochets to get into this corner over here so that we can start round 2. Once we're in this corner, we're going to chain 2, which I've done here. This chain 2 always counts as your first leg in your granny square cluster. So since we already have our first double crochet here, we're going to create 2 more double crochets in that space to create a cluster. Then we're going to chain 2 and then create another cluster. If you feel like I'm going too fast in this video, you can slow the video down in the player right there on YouTube. After you make that cluster, chain 1, and then you're going to do the same thing right here in this corner. So 3 double crochets, chain 2, 3 double crochets in the same space, chain 1, locate the next corner, and we're going to repeat that 2 more times. I'm going to go off camera and complete the last 2, but I'll meet you back over here when it's time for us to connect again with those chain 2. Okay, I completed the square all the way around, and we're back here, and we're about to join and then slip stitch and start our 3rd round. So you have your chains here. You're going to do the same thing you did to join the last time, where you're going to find your chain 2 and you're going to slip stitch into the top of it. Come on now. And then you're going to slip stitch across the next 2 double crochets so that you can put yourself in this corner. And then once you're in that corner, you're going to chain 2, which counts as your first double crochet in your granny cluster. And to complete that cluster, we're going to go ahead and we're going to double crochet 2 right next to it, and then chain 2, and then do another cluster in the same corner space. Oop, my hook is getting crazy. Okay, once you've done that, that's your corner. You're going to chain 1, and then you're going to go right here in this middle space here. That chain 1 space that you created down here, you're going to go right into it and put a granny cluster. So 3 double crochets. And then chain 1. That'll put you back in the corner. So you're going to do granny cluster, chain 2, granny cluster. Oh, I'm so excited. The color's about to change. I love when that happens. Look at that. It's purple now. That's so cute. That's so cute. All right, so we're gonna chain one after that granny cluster there. We have our corner done, and we're gonna find ourselves in that next chain space area right here where my hook is, and we're gonna place a granny cluster there. Well, if I could put my hook in the right spot, we'll put a granny cluster there. Chain one. That purple is just so pretty. I love purple. Okay, chain one. And then we're going to do the same thing we did in this corner and this corner over here. And I'm going to go off camera. But you're going to do exact same thing that you did on both those sides, on the last two sides, to create your square. And then you'll connect it here at your chain two space from the beginning of the round. And I'll be back. We're at the end of this round, and we're about to join in the chain that we created at the beginning of the round. I'm going to join at the top of it by slip stitching into the top of it. And then we're going to slip stitch across these two double crochets so that we can get in the corner. So as you can clearly see, it's getting really repetitive. So I'm going to finish this round with you, and then I'm going to cut you loose, and you're going to work your back panel. So we're here. This is the back panel. We're creating the back panel right now. You're going to work this back panel up to 11 rounds. So right now we're on 1, 2, 3. We're on our third round. You're going to work this sucker all the way out until you get to round 11. Okay, so congratulations. You're completely done with the backmost part of your cardigan. This is what the back looks like. Our square worked all the way out to 11 rounds. If you have trouble trying to figure out your 11 rounds or how to count them in this sea of adorable granny clusters, you can find your center, and then I like to count out the corners all the way out to the last corner here. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So we are back to our little visual aid. We're here. You've completed this portion of the cardigan, and now we're going to go from the back to our first front panel. You ended right here, so we're going to start working up our front panel in rows. So you're no longer working in rounds anymore. We'll now be working in rows for both front panels and both sleeves. Here we are. We're at the corner where we've ended our square. And you probably have already found yourself in the corner like we've been doing before. What we're going to do is we're going to be working in the next 1, 2, 3, and 4 chain spaces. And our first row pattern will be, you're going to chain 3. Now that chain 3, let me back it up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So this chain 3 will act as your first double crochet chain 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be working in these chain spaces, but instead of going into the chain spaces, for this first row I'm going to have you work in that actual chain, and you're going to work in the back loop. The reasoning for that is once this row is done, we want our front panels to lay properly on the doll once the garment is finished, and this will ensure that we'll get that nice fold, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. So we're going to locate that first space, and we're going to be working in the back loop, and we're going to place a granny cluster there. So that's 3 double crochets in that back loop. Once you get your granny cluster done, we're going to chain 1, locate the next space, but not working into it. We're going to work into the chain. We're going to work into the back loop of that chain. Place 3 double crochets and create your granny cluster. Chain 1. One more time. All right, and then we're on chain 1. In the next space, we're not going to be working a granny cluster. We're going to place a double crochet in the back loop of that chain 1 space. Our first row will repeat itself, so pay attention. You're going to do a chain 3, and that acts as a double crochet, chain 1, granny cluster, chain 1, granny cluster, chain 1, granny cluster, chain 1, and then a single double crochet. That's the repeat for the first row. After that, you're going to turn your work and chain 2. Now this chain 2 acts as a double crochet. After that chain 2, we're going to place 2 double crochets in this space right here. I've already placed 1, and then this is the second one, and that will create our first cluster in that space. Chain 1. Locate the next chain 1 space, and now we don't have to work into the back loops anymore. We only had to work in the back loops on that first row there. So locate the next space, and we're going to place a granny cluster there. That's 3 double crochets. Chain 1. Locate the next space. Granny cluster. Chain 1. Now this last space is a little bit different, but I think you'll understand it once I explain it. So you're going to place 2 double crochets in this last space right here. Now we're going to place that last double crochet to create our granny cluster, but we're not going to place it in the space. We're going to find the top of that chain 3 that we did. And I don't like to put the last double crochet in like the top of that chain. I actually like to put it in the second one. So like the chain here, and then this would be the chain 3 right at the top. If you can kind of see that, I put it here. And what that does is it just kind of keeps things nice and straight so that your garment works up nicely. You see how that looks? It just looks like a regular cluster, and that's what we want. So after that, you're going to turn your work, and you're going to chain 3 again. You're going to repeat the pattern repeat from the first row in row 3. So I'm going to do it again with you. Chain 3. And that chain 3 acts as a double crochet, chain 1. And then we're going to locate our first chain space in the row previously, so it will be here. And we're going to place our granny cluster there. Chain 1. Find our next space and place a granny cluster there. Chain 1. Alright, so you should be here at the end. And just like in the beginning, we're going to place a double, we're going to chain 1 first. And then we're going to place a double crochet right here. And it's going to be at the top of that chain area right here. Create our chain space for the next row. See? So if you get kind of lost, what I like to do is I look at the beginning of the row, because what happens with this repeat is that how you started the row will kind of give you an idea of how to end it. So if you started the row with a chain 3, which acts as a double crochet chain 1, you will end with a chain 1 double crochet. And then you'll turn your work. After this, I'm going to let you loose. So pay attention. Chain 2. And that is a double crochet. And then right here in our previous chain space that we created, we're going to place 2 double crochets to complete a granny cluster. And then chain 1. See? Find your next space, put a granny cluster. Chain 1. Next space, granny cluster. Chain 1. And then that advice I gave you about how the row starting is how it will end. applies here as well. So in the beginning of this row, we did a chain 2, and then we did 2 double crochets to complete this granny cluster here. So here at the end, we're going to place 2 double crochets, and then we're going to put a double crochet in this chain space. All right. So that's going to be your pattern repeat. You're going to repeat row 1 and row 2 over and over and over again until you have done 24 rows. Okay, editing Joshy here. What you're seeing here is a totally new project. Um, the last cardigan that I was working on just a moment ago, I was working on it off camera while I was watching anime, and I may have got ahead of myself and gotten past the part where I left you guys at. So here I am, a brand new project. This is one of the bigger sizes. So this is the size that would be made for like a Patty Play Pal. But I want to show you guys something really quickly. So we've just worked our first panel. You'll notice that that first panel is a bit long. You'll also notice that where we worked into the back loops at the top of the garment here, it really lays. It's not giving you any like resistance. It just lays flat, and that's exactly what we want, and that's why we worked in those back loops there. This extra length is also a part of the design that's going to create a little drape up here where the shoulders of the doll will be. And this won't even be apparent or anything once the garment is finished. So if it looks a bit longer than your square, it's supposed to, and that's normal. So what I want to show you guys is how to begin the next front panel on this side. So to begin your second front panel, all we're going to do is turn the garment over to the inside, making this corner the right side again, and do the exact same thing that we did for this panel. So I'm going to go into that chain and attach with a chain 3. On the next chain space, which will be right here, so not in here, but right here, and instead of working in the back loops, we're going to work into the front loops. And that's just the same thing that we did on the other front panel, but in reverse. So we're going to place a granny cluster in that front panel. I'm sorry, in that front loop. of the chain. Find the next space, granny cluster into that front loop. Then chain one, do the same thing. Chain one, and then the last space here, we're going to place one double crochet into that front loop of the chain. Alright, and that's that first row. That's that first row. So that's how you start that second panel on your Comfi Cardi. I'm going to let you go ahead and finish the second panel. It's the exact same pattern from this one. You're going to do the same thing over and over and over again until you get to 24 rows. And then I'll meet you back here, probably with another Comfi Cardi, and we'll continue the tutorial. Sorry about that with the changing of the projects. Because I'm working so many of these up, you're probably going to see several of these. Alright, so you've worked both your panels. From here, we're now going to work our sleeves. We've completed the back panel and both of our front panels here. And now it's time for us to work the sleeves. So you're going to lay your work back out flat. And to find where we're going to start our sleeves and end our sleeves, I want you to find the middle portion. So like where the neck would be, right here on your square. And you're going to follow that all the way out till you get to your corner. Now, the reason I want you to find that corner is because we're going to count to the 5th space on the outermost part of your front panel. So once you found that spot right here, so that 5th spot, you're going to work it over 8. So it'll look like this. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, skip, 6, 7, and then 8. So you can mark that with a couple of pins or a stitch marker just to kind of keep you in one, like in the correct spot. Starting this row is going to look very similar to the first row that we did in our front panels. So let's begin. I'll show you how that looks. So I'm going to attach with a chain 3 once more. And then we're going to work a granny cluster in that very next chain space. After our granny cluster, we'll chain 1, find the next space, and go ahead and place a granny cluster. Chain 1, next space, granny cluster. Chain 1, next space, granny cluster. Alright, now the next space you would think would be into this corner space. No, we're going to skip that corner space. By placing a granny cluster here, we will actually smush this granny cluster and things will just look bad and it won't fit on the doll appropriately. So we're going to skip this area. We're going to act like it doesn't exist, and we're going to find that next space and we're going to put a granny cluster into it. There we go. Chain 1, granny cluster. Chain 1. All right, so we're here at the end. This is our 8th space from beginning from over here. And we're going to place just a single double crochet in this space to end that row. That first row. Oops. This would end our first row in our sleeve. Now, if you recall back from when you did your panels, this is very similar. The only difference between how you did your panels and how you're going to do your sleeves is that there's just more clusters. But you will repeat the first row and the second row over and over and over again. I'm going to do the second row with you. So the second row in our sleeve, we're going to chain 2. And in that chain space, we're going to place 2 double crochets. Ooh. 2 double crochets to make our little cluster. Chain 1. Find the next chain space. Place a granny cluster into it. We're going to be placing granny clusters in all of the chain spaces. You're going to place a chain 1 in between each and every granny cluster. Alright, so we're at the end of the row right there. We're going to place 2 double crochets, and then we're going to place a double crochet into the top or the second chain. If you're like me, you can put it in the second chain, but the top of this chain. Let me show you. 2 double crochets, and then place 1 double crochet in that chain. Alright, that is your repeat. You will repeat the first and second row over and over and over again until you have worked up that sleeve to 16 rows. So I just want to note, the only thing that would be different about starting your other sleeve on the other side of your Comfi Cardi would be just to, this is the orientation that we're in right now, where the garment is facing towards you. And we started here in the 5th space on the front panel. You can do that same thing by turning your garment over and just flipping it on the other side. And it's the exact same steps. You'd still be working on that front panel in the same space, and you'd work it the same exact way. The only difference is you turned your garment inside out so that the orientation is the same on the other side. That is it. And I will meet you back at the end of the 16 rows for both sleeves, and then we'll work on the cuff. Alright, so we have gotten all the way to the point where it's now starting to look more like a cardigan. So we've done the back portion, the 2 front panels, and now we've done both sleeves. Before we sew this down the sides and actually create a garment that a doll can wear, we're going to flatten this all back out, and then we're going to work across both sides of the sleeve, and I'm going to show you how to create the ribbing. I also would like to tell you that if you don't want to fuss about with the ribbing around the edges, so like the bottom of the cardigan and on both sleeves, and around the edges here to close the cardigan off, you don't have to. You could actually go ahead and just do a single crochet on either sides of the sleeves for the cuffs, and you could do a single crochet around here, and you could do a single crochet across the bottom once you've sewn the sides down. So if you just kind of felt like you're enjoying this situation and you don't want to work with lace weight, fingering weight, or weight 1 yarn, because I know some people are intimidated by that, you can stop here. You could stop here, you could add some pockets, you could put bows on it, you could do a whole lot with just this. And at this point, the Comfi Cardi is more or less finished if that's what you want to do. So just sew down the sides, do a single crochet somewhere, do even a nice border you can find on Instagram or YouTube or anywhere really. You can find a nice border to go around and just have fun. I've been working this project out with a 2.75 millimeter hook, and now I'm about to switch to a 1.65 millimeter hook. I'm switching sizes because we're going to be switching yarn weights. So this is weight 1. You could even use a weight 0 if you're using a crochet thread like I showed you previously in the video. But I'm going to be using this. This is a fingering weight. It's weight 1. Okay, for tutorial purposes, I moved over to another one of my Comfi Cardi projects. This is done with a 4 weight. And we'll be dropping down to, we're still going to be dropping down to a weight 1 in yarn, and we're going to be dropping from, I worked this up like I worked up that square sample at the beginning of the video. This is a 4.5 millimeter hook. I worked this up in that 4.5 millimeter hook, and then the 2.75 hook that I worked this one up with, this is the one we've been working on most of the tutorial. I'm going to be using this to do the ribbing. Make sure that you're working, you want the outside of the garment to be facing you. So if you're looking at that inside square where you can obviously tell this is the inside and this is the outside, make sure that the outside is facing you because you want to work your cuff on the right side starting out. And then I am going to chain 5. So, and I'm going to count that first, I'm going to count that little slip stitch that I started at the beginning. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, from here, we're going to turn slightly where those chains are laying flat. Once you have your chain 5, you're going to skip your first chain, and then you're going to single crochet in that next chain. And then you're going to single crochet in all of the remaining chains. You should have a total of 4 single crochets when you're done. You should have something that looks a little bit like this. A little teeny tiny row of single crochets. Here, let's get closer. Once you get to the end of that row, you're going to take your hook and you're going to pick up 2 stitches from right here next to where you were. And we're going to slip stitch those together. And then you're going to chain. Turn your work. You're going to be working in these stitches, but you're only going to be working in the back loop of these stitches from now and until you finish your entire cuff. You're going to be working in these back loops. That's what's going to create that nice rib-like texture. So in the back loops, you're going to place a single crochet in each of these stitches. You're still going to have a total of 4. Once you get to that end there, you're going to chain and then turn your work. And you're going to work that exact same pattern back down till you get to our cuff beginning of the work. And again, once you get to the end of that row, we'll be right here, back where our cuff is at. You're going to slip stitch 2 together. Chain 1. I don't think I mentioned it at the beginning, and I apologize about that, but I am working. You see those? You see how that's being created? That's because I'm also working in one loop across this sleeve. So whenever I take and I pick up 2 stitches here at the top of our sleeve, I'm only picking up one of the loops. It just helps the garment maintain its beauty, and it looks really good on the inside of your garment as well. And then repeat for the cuff. And you will do this all the way across your sleeve. Make sure you have 4. I like to pull and then count the stitches. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure you maintain 4 so you don't want your work going up and down. Once you get here to the top of your sleeve again, you're going to slip stitch 2 together. Chain 1 and then turn your work. And then we're going to place single crochet in the back loops of each of these stitches. That's our pattern repeat. You're going to continue those steps all the way until you get to the end down here. Once you get to the end here, I'll show you how I like to connect the cuffs and then sew down the side of the garment. Alright, so now that we're here at the end of the row, and we've worked that nice ribbing, that looks so pretty. The project outside is facing us. So this is what your ribbing should look like across the outside. And this is what it should look like from the inside. Those little divots. And you'll also notice that there's a very defined row right here. I like that because the ribbing likes to fold into itself, and once this is sewn up, that's going to cause the sleeve to feel like it wants to go in the right direction and everything. But the garment is facing us right now, so what you want to do is you want to close it in on itself like so. And then what will be exposed to you will now be the inside of the garment. And the reason we need that to happen is because we want to sew or slip stitch down the side of this entire cardi. Yeah. And before I do that, I want to show you something. So this is the other side of our garment. The cuff is already done, and I've already slip stitched down the sides to join this and everything. So this side is done. At the top of our garment, you'll notice that there's like this little area right here where it kind of sits upward from the neck, and that's from that extra slack from when we were doing our front panel, because you can see right here it lines up at the bottom, and that's what we want when we're slip stitching or sewing down the sides. We want to make sure everything lines up, and we want to make sure that this lines up with the bottom of the square like so, which means you're going to have that extra slack at the top, and that's fine. That's exactly what you want. That slack is going to be there so that when the doll sits in the garment, it won't, the bottom won't want to come up because there's enough slack for the doll to be there. So that's normal. And I mention that because when you're lining up your garment and everything, when you line it up at the bottom here, you're going to notice that right here in this armpit area, it's going to want to be way higher than it should, and it won't match up. But I like to go from the cuff down the sleeve and then down the body so that you can continue to hold all these pieces together, and they will line up. And once all of this is lined up appropriately, that extra little space that's at the top where the neck is supposed to be will just automatically happen. You don't even have to worry about that. As long as you keep all of these nice and straight and make sure everything lines up, that will happen on its own. So, back to the cuff. I like to find the opposite end where we started at. That's already completed, and I like to go ahead and just put my hook there. And you want to find that yarn loop that you created from finishing that last row and just slip stitch through there. And then you're going to do that all the way down this cuff. So I go through each stitch. You can work in the back loops continuously like you've been doing this whole time. It's just going to make the entire garment look very intentional and well thought out. And then we continue. I continue that same pattern of just slip stitching all the way down the garment. Now you have an option where you could stop here and weave these ends in and then get a piece of yarn that actually matches your garment, and then you could sew it down or slip stitch down from here all the way till you get to the end here. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep my yarn, my working yarn here, and I'm just going to slip stitch down the side. Now when I slip stitch, I like to pierce into these double crochet stitches. I don't like going around the double crochet stitches because when you flip the garment over, if this is not the same color as your sleeve, you will see it. You'll see it all the way down, and either you'll hate it or you won't. But I like to pierce the stitches. So instead of going, here, let's get close. So yeah, I like to pierce the stitches. So instead of going into this space right here, like so, instead of doing that, I will go straight through. Like you could pick up one or two legs of the stitch and just go through it. And then bring that yarn through and then slip stitch that way. Now you could do this same technique with sewing. I really like it because it keeps the yarn that's holding the garment together inside the garment rather than it being on the outside. It's just one of the things that I guess I'm kind of persnickety with, because it's not something that you absolutely have to do. You could go into the spaces. It's not a problem, especially if you use the same color as your garment. Then it won't matter because you'll see it, but it'll blend. But because I'm using contrasting, this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do this all the way down, all the way until we get to the end here. And then when we get to the end, I'll show you how to do the ribbing on the bottom of our cardi. Okay, we're done. I have slip stitched down this entire side, and I've woven in my ends on both sides. And as you can see, they line up to create a straight line, or rather a relatively straight line across. That's the condition we want to be in when we start our ribbing across the bottom. So right now we're looking at the inside of the garment because I've gone ahead and flipped our garment right sides out again, and that's fine. But we're going to be working on the bottom. So what we'll do here is open it on out and make sure that the good side is facing you. So we'll be working at the bottom. The head should be facing towards you, and this is the outside of the garment. That is important because we're going to be working the same pattern repeat that we worked for our sleeves. And if you remember, I showed you guys the inside of the sleeve. So flip it out. We're going to be creating this little very defined line again. That's going to be on the inside of our garment, and that's going to be on the inside here. So making sure that the garment is right sides out and the right side is facing you is important. You're going to attach your yarn at the end, and then you're going to work the same pattern that you worked for the cuff at the bottom. You're just going to be going from one end all the way over to this end. And once you get there, I'll meet you here or at the end of your row so that I can show you what I like to do to close up our cardi around here. And then that'll be it. Oh my god, we're almost done. We're almost done with our Comfi Cardi. Okay. So you've worked your entire ribbing across the bottom of your cardigan, and it's looking pretty good. Everything's looking pretty good. You'll notice again on the inside here that little ridge. It's just so nice. And then you'll also notice that after you've done the ribbing, it'll want to sit better. So, I mean, that's just, oh, so perfect. Alright, so the only thing left to do before we call the Comfi Cardi complete is that we just need to work some kind of border around the opening. So with this border, you can be pretty creative. You could do a simple single crochet around the entire border, which is what we're going to do. And then after we do that single crochet, you're free to do any kind of border or accent that you'd like to do. So I'd let you go at that point, and you just have fun. And again, you can add all kinds of bows, you can add pockets, you could do anything with this Comfi Cardi. That's why it's so much fun for me. So let me show you what I do to complete the Comfi Cardi. Keep my yarn attached so I don't cut it off after I've completed like that last row of the ribbing. What I'll do is I'll do another run of the ribbing. So I'll do single crochet in every back loop of the stitch, and it should give you a total of 4. And then from there I just continue up the sides all the way around back to this side over here. And you could do that a few times to build this out, or you could do it just the one time and call it done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place single crochets actually around the stitches. So earlier we were talking about going through the stitches. You can continue to do that, but at this point it's fine. This is the outer brim of the Comfi Cardi. You don't have to worry about something showing through and you don't like it. It's supposed to show. I go around each of these double crochets that completed our granny clusters. And I go around each about 2 times. So in the space, single crochet about 2 times around each double crochet. And I do it about 2 times because I'm kind of persnickety when it comes to drape and the way it fits on the doll. Like, that's really important to me. So by putting 2 in here, I'm ensuring that the drape stays nice and that we don't get any stretch out from too many stitches in one spot, and then we don't get any shrinkage from too little stitches in one spot. So 2 in each spot around a chain or a double crochet. Yeah, and I'll work this all the way around in this exact same way. I'll meet you when we get back over here, and I'll show you what I do on top of these single crochets. Alright, so when we arrive over here to this end of our ribbing, we're going to do the same thing that we pretty much did on this side. We're going to place a single crochet into one of the loops of this chain right here, and this would be a chain because this is where we started at when we began our ribbing. So just find one of the legs, single crochet into it of each chain. Okay. Now from here, like I mentioned before, you could stop here because it's considered to be finished on the edges, both on the inside and the outside. It looks pretty nice. But what I'm going to do, and what I have done for all of my Comfi Cardis, I like to do one last row, and that last row I like to make it a half double crochet, just to give this area a little bit more, I guess, height or oomph, if you will. It looks nice. So from here, we're just going to chain 2 and then work half double crochets in the front loop. So looking at our loops here, the loops that would be closer to you would be the ones that you were working into. So instead of going into the back loop like we've been doing with ribbing, I'm going to go through that front loop. And there you go. I would call the Comfi Cardi complete. So with the half double crochet that I did around the border, it just completes it, in my opinion. It makes it look really nice. This one is pretty big. I'm not even sure what doll this is gonna go to yet. It's gonna need some blocking, but here, let me show you what the cardigan looks like that we were working on throughout most of the video. Mentioned previously in the video, I used a self-striping yarn to do this, and I just played around with color blocking. It looks so nice. Ah, so nice. I love this pattern. Here, let's get close. This is what it looks like with the half double and everything. It looks so nice. It really completes the project. Alright, from here you could do any kind of border around, like I mentioned before, or you can leave it here and call it done. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and if you guys have any questions or anything like that, I want you to pop them down in the description below, and then I will try and help you if you're making this and you reached a snag. I love this. Let's see some dolls in these. This Comfi Cardi being pretty much my first crochet pattern tutorial, I'm really going to be looking for some feedback from you guys. I want you guys to tell me if you understand things, if you don't understand things, and if you make the Comfi Cardi, I would love for you guys to share it with me. Also, something I'd like to address. I don't care what you do with this pattern. You can make it and sell it if you want to. This pattern to me was just a whole lot of fun, and I've been having a heck of a lot of fun, and that's what I'd like for this to be. If you feel like you want to make the Comfi Cardi and sell it, but you feel like, oh no, I probably should pay Josh, don't pay me anything. You could pay me by just taking this video and sharing it with other people that want to crochet for their dolls. That's it. And with that, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye. And happy making!